I'd been working the overnight security desk at the Fairmont Royal York for 3 months when I found the card. 3 months of settling into the building's particular rhythm, the way a century-old hotel breathes different at night. All that limestone and brass and wood paneling holding on to decades of cigarette smoke and perfume and God knows what else. January meant the tourist traffic had dried up after the holidays. Just business travelers and the occasional couple celebrating something that couldn't wait for warmer weather. The building suited me. That's what I told myself anyway. My shift ran midnight to 8. 8 hours of monitoring camera feeds that showed mostly empty hallways, walking rounds through corridors that stretched longer than they had any right to, checking doors that never opened. The occasional drunk fumbling with a key card, swearing at the little red light that wouldn't turn green no matter how many times they swiped. I'd gotten good at the helpful but distant routine. Let me help you with that, sir. Get them inside. Make sure they weren't going to choke on their own vomit. Move on. It was exactly the kind of work I needed after the divorce. No one to talk to. No one expecting conversation. Just me and the building and the slow rotation of camera angles on the monitors. Melissa used to say I preferred buildings to people. She wasn't wrong. Most nights nothing happened. That was the point. Security theater, really. Management wanted a warm body at the desk. Someone to look alert if a guest came down at 3 in the morning needing fresh towels or complaining about noise from a room that turned out to be empty. I'd investigated 5 suspicious sounds in my first month. Every single one was old pipes, or the building settling, or wind coming off Lake Ontario and finding its way through window frames that predated modern weatherproofing. The pay was decent, better than I'd expected for overnight work. The benefits were solid. I could do the job half asleep, which I often was. I found the card during my 2 a.m. rounds, 2nd floor, east wing. I'd just checked the stairwell door, locked, same as always, and was heading toward the elevator bank when I felt something stiff in my jacket pocket. Inside the pocket, not sitting on top. I stopped under one of those old brass sconces they'd probably installed in 1920-something and pulled it out. Laminated card, professional job, the kind with heat-sealed edges that wouldn't peel apart. Maybe 3 inches by 5 inches, plain white background. 7 rules in neat typeface, centered. No header, no explanation, no signature. Never respond to knocking from room 1408. Avoid empty elevators smelling of roses. Stay away from the Royal Suite corridor between 3:33 and 3:47 a.m. Ignore piano music from the closed ballroom. Never acknowledge guests wearing clothing from before 1950. Never answer the front desk phone if it rings exactly 3 times, then stops. I read it twice, turned it over. Blank on the back. Held it up to the light like that would reveal something. The thing that got me was how it had ended up inside my pocket. Not tucked into the breast pocket where I kept my pen and notepad. This was my right side pocket, the one I habitually shoved my hand into when I was walking rounds. I'd have noticed something already in there. Would have felt it. I checked my other pockets. Just the usual. Keys, phone, the mini flashlight I never actually used. My jacket had been hanging in my locker until 11:45. I'd walked straight from the locker room to the front desk, gotten the handoff from Shane, my evening shift supervisor. He'd given me the standard rundown. Quiet night, couple checked into room 712 around 10. Business traveler in 321 ordered room service at 9:30 and hadn't been heard from since. Shane could have slipped it into my pocket during the handoff. We'd stood close enough. He had that kind of sense of humor, dry, weird, the kind of guy who'd think this was hilarious. I pocketed the card and finished my rounds. Back at the desk, I pulled it out again. Read through the rules one more time. Room 1408. We didn't have a room 1408. The 14th floor only went up to 14-7. I'd walked it enough times to know. Hotels skipped the 13th floor as a general rule, so 14 was actually the 13th, but even accounting for that, there was no 1408. Roses, elevators, right. The Royal Suite corridor. That was real enough. Top floor, west wing, where they put celebrities and minor royalty, and people who thought spending $4,000 a night on a hotel room made sense. I'd never been up there during that specific time window. Never had a reason to be. Piano music from the closed ballroom. The ballroom was only closed in the sense that it wasn't being used tonight. It was closed most nights. The grand piano in there was real, though. Big old Steinway that probably cost more than I'd make in 5 years. Maybe Shane had recorded some music, rigged up a speaker, waiting for me to report ghostly piano sounds so he could laugh his ass off. Guests in old clothing. That one was almost clever. The Royal York attracted history buffs, people who got off on the building's connection to old Toronto money and visiting dignitaries and whatever else the promotional materials bragged about. Someone wearing vintage clothing wouldn't be that strange. The phone thing was oddly specific. 3 rings, then stopping. I pulled out my phone and texted Shane. Real funny. You can pick up your little prop card tomorrow. He texted back 4 minutes later. What card? The rules card. In my pocket. No idea what you're talking about. Right, seriously, man. You okay? I didn't respond. Shane was committing to the bit, or he genuinely didn't know what I was talking about. Either way, I had 6 more hours of shift to get through. I tucked the card into my wallet behind my debit card where I wouldn't lose it. Somebody's idea of a prank. Hazing the new guy. Even if 3 months wasn't exactly new anymore. Maybe there was a whole tradition of it. Print up fake rules, spook the overnight security, see if they'd actually avoid the 14th floor or jump at shadows. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. The cameras cycled through their rotation. 2nd floor, east wing, empty. Lobby, empty except for my desk. 4th floor, stairwell, empty. The building doing its breathing thing. All that old infrastructure creaking and settling around me. Just another quiet January night. The elevator doors slid open at 2:47 a.m. I'd reached the 14th floor maybe 10 seconds earlier, still catching my breath from the stairs. The empty car waited there, interior lights bright and steady, polished brass gleaming. Nothing inside. Nobody stepping out. Then the smell hit me. Roses, heavy and sweet and wrong, cloying in a way that made my throat tighten. Not the fresh-cut scent you'd get from a nice arrangement in someone's room. This was funeral flowers left too long in summer heat, petals going brown at the edges, water in the vase turning thick and cloudy. The kind of smell that gets into your sinuses and stays there. I stood in the hallway, staring into that empty elevator. The second rule surfaced in my mind, clear as when Walsh had written it on that card. If the elevator smells like flowers, take the stairs. My hand was already reaching for the button. Stupid. I knew it was stupid even as I stepped inside. But 3 months of overnight shifts had taught me the building's rhythms, and I'd walked every floor, ridden every elevator. This was just air freshener, maybe. Or someone had actually brought up roses, left them in here for a trip or two. The smell lingered in enclosed spaces. That was all. The doors slid shut behind me. I pressed L for lobby. The button lit up under my finger, warm and ordinary. The car lurched into motion, descending smooth and steady. Floor indicator counting down. 14, 13, 12. The elevator stopped. Not the normal deceleration, the gentle settling you get at your floor. This was a full stop, sudden enough that my knees flexed to catch my balance. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, steadied but dimmer now like the voltage had dropped. The rose smell intensified. My eyes watered. The doors opened. I wasn't looking at the 12th floor. The carpet stretched out in front of me. Deep burgundy instead of the navy blue I'd walked across 100 times. Not the industrial hotel carpet either, the kind designed to hide stains and last 20 years. This was thick pile, ornate patterns woven through it in gold thread, Victorian patterns, acanthus leaves and medallions. The walls were papered, cream background with burgundy flocking, heavy velvet texture that caught the light. Wainscoting below, dark wood polished to a mirror shine. Gas lamps. Gas lamps flickering in brass sconces along the corridor, actual flames dancing behind cut glass shades. The light moved across the wallpaper in shifting patterns, warm and amber and completely wrong for a building that had been fully electrified since the 1930s. I couldn't move. Stood there in the elevator doorway, one hand braced against the frame. The metal felt real under my palm, solid. The same temperature as always. The hallway stretched away in both directions, longer than it should be. Doors at regular intervals, dark wood with brass numbers. I couldn't read them from where I stood. The light wasn't steady enough. Something moved at the far end of the corridor. A woman stepped into view, walking toward me, toward the elevator. Her dress rustled with each step. I could hear it even from 30 feet away, silk and taffeta whispering. The dress was Edwardian, high-necked with a fitted bodice and long sleeves, the skirt falling in elegant folds to the floor. Deep green, almost black in the gaslight. Her hair was piled on top of her head in the style from a century ago, held with combs I could see glinting as she passed under the lamps. She walked past the elevator without looking at me. Didn't glance in my direction, didn't pause. Just continued down that impossible corridor, the sound of her dress fading as she moved away. I caught a glimpse of her profile as she passed. Young, maybe 30. Her face expressionless, eyes focused on something I couldn't see. Then she was gone, disappeared around a corner that shouldn't exist. The doors slid shut. The elevator lurched upward. I grabbed the handrail, heart hammering against my ribs. The floor indicator wasn't working. The display stayed dark. But I could feel the motion, the familiar sensation of ascending. The light steadied, brightening back to normal. The rose smell faded so quickly I almost wondered if I'd imagined it. Almost. The doors opened onto the lobby. Marble floors. Art Deco columns. The front desk to my left. My security station to my right. Every light exactly where it should be, casting the same shadows I'd memorized over 3 months of overnight shifts. The grandfather clock against the far wall reading 2:49. 2 minutes. I stepped out of the elevator on legs that felt uncertain, like I'd been sitting too long and the circulation had to come back. The car doors closed behind me. The elevator sat there, quiet and ordinary, brass doors reflecting the lobby lights. 2 minutes had passed since I'd stepped inside on the 14th floor. Felt longer. The memory of that corridor stretched in my head, elastic and strange. The burgundy carpet, the gas lamps, the woman in her Edwardian dress walking past without seeing me. It sat in my mind wrong, too vivid and too hazy at the same time, like trying to remember a dream that had felt completely real while you were in it. I walked to my station, sat down. The chair creaked the way it always did. The front desk phone rang. One ring, sharp and clear in the silent lobby. I turned my head to look at it, watched the light blinking on the console. 2 rings. The 6th rule came back. Never answer the front desk phone after midnight, no matter who calls. 3 rings. Then silence. The light stopped blinking. The phone sat there, ordinary black plastic on the polished desk surface. I stared at it. My hand had moved toward it on the 2nd ring, muscle memory from years of answering phones, responding to calls. I'd stopped myself halfway, fingers frozen above the receiver. My radio crackled. "Barry, status check." Shane's voice, clear and normal and anchored in the real world. I grabbed the radio, thumb on the transmit button. "All clear. Just finished a floor walk." The lie came out smooth. Professional. Nothing in my voice to suggest I'd just spent 2 minutes in a corridor that didn't exist, watching a woman from another century walk past. "Copy that." Shane sounded distracted, probably dealing with his own rounds. "Hey, avoid the 14th floor after 3 a.m. Renovations starting tonight, contractors coming in early. They've got that whole floor blocked off. Renovations. Right. Understood, I said. Good, I'm signing off. Call if you need anything. Will do. The radio clicked into silence. I sat at my station in the empty lobby. 2:51 a.m. The building breathed around me, all that old infrastructure settling. Somewhere a pipe knocked. The heating system cycled on with a distant rumble. Just another quiet January night. Except I could still smell roses if I concentrated. Faint trace at the back of my throat, sweet and cloying and wrong. I went back to the desk and opened the hotel's incident database. 3 months working here, and I'd never bothered looking deeper than the nightly reports Shane left for me. Security theater mostly. Logged rounds, equipment checks. The occasional drunk guest needing an escort to their room. Nothing that required digging through decades of filed complaints. The search interface looked older than me. Gray screen, green text, that particular clunky design from when computers still seemed like temporary technology. I typed 1408 into the room number field and hit enter. The screen flickered. Scrolled. Kept scrolling. 47 incident reports stretching back to 1963. I sat there watching them populate one after another, each entry adding another line to a pattern I should have noticed months ago if I'd been paying attention. Guest complaint, October 1963, persistent knocking from within walls, no source identified. Maintenance report, March 1967. Guest reported voices in unoccupied room, investigated, found nothing. Security log, July 1972. Guest requested room change due to watched feeling, accommodated without incident. The language changed across decades, but the content stayed consistent. Knocking, voices, that sense of being observed. Different guests, different years, same room. Management kept renting it out anyway, kept logging the complaints, kept pretending 47 reports over 26 years didn't form a pretty clear picture. I scrolled faster, the dates blurred together until I hit the final entry. January 15th, 1989. Incident type. Fatality. My hand stopped on the mouse. The report was longer than the others. Guest Jackson Manning, 47, businessman from Detroit. Checked in January 12th for a 3-day stay. Complained to front desk on the 13th about noise. Knocking, voices, the usual catalog. Staff offered to move him. He refused. Said he'd paid for the room. Wasn't going to let hotel nonsense disrupt his schedule. Housekeeping found his belongings packed on the 14th. Bed unslept in. Guest nowhere in room. Security located him on the 14th floor exterior ledge at 6:23 a.m. Jumped before anyone could intervene. Room 1408 had been officially closed since that morning. 33 years of sitting empty while the hotel operated around it. I closed the database and sat back in my chair. The lobby stretched out in front of me, all that polished marble and brass gleaming under the chandeliers. Beautiful building, historic landmark, century of hospitality and carefully maintained elegance. And a sealed room on the 14th floor where a man went crazy enough to jump rather than spend another night inside. The clock above the concierge desk read 3:12. I should have stayed put. Finished my rounds, logged the shift, gone home when morning crew arrived. That's what the rules said. What Shane had been pretty explicit about during my first week. Weird stuff happens at night in old buildings. You ignore it, document anything physical, never investigate sounds. Then I heard the piano. Faint at first, drifting across the lobby from somewhere past the closed restaurant, that particular tinny quality of live music filtered through distance and walls. Upbeat tempo, jazz arrangement, the kind of thing you'd expect at a wedding reception or New Year's party. Except the hotel had no events scheduled. I'd checked the bookings myself at the start of shift. January was slow season, couple dozen guests scattered across 800 rooms, everything else dark and quiet. The music got louder. I stood up. The melody resolved into something recognizable. Ain't She Sweet, played fast and bright by what sounded like a full band, trumpet, clarinet, drums keeping energetic time. The Canadian Room, I realized, had to be. Only ballroom on this floor, and the sound was coming from that direction. Shane's voice in my head. You hear music, you don't hear music. You see lights, you don't see lights. I walked toward it anyway. The restaurant was dark as I passed, chairs stacked on tables, that closed-up smell of commercial kitchen and stale coffee. Past the gift shop with its security gate pulled down, past the corridor leading to the business center. The music grew clearer with each step. Not just piano now, but the whole arrangement. Brass section punching through the melody while someone on drums laid down a driving rhythm. The Canadian Room doors stood open. Golden light spilled across the hallway floor. Warm and buttery, the quality of old incandescent bulbs. Nothing like the LED retrofit the hotel had installed last year. I could see movement inside, shapes passing through that amber glow, shadows that resolved into people as I got closer. The ballroom was full. I stopped in the doorway and stared. Couples dancing across the parquet floor, dozens of them, moving in that synchronized style you see in old movies. The women wore drop-waist dresses with fringe that swayed when they spun, headbands with feathers, long pearl necklaces that caught the light, men in tuxedos with tails, white gloves, hair slicked back with pomade. They foxtrotted and Charleston through the space with practiced ease, faces bright with laughter. On stage, the band played. 7 pieces: trumpet, trombone, clarinet, piano, drums, banjo, double bass, all of them in matching burgundy jackets, all focused on their instruments with the concentration of professionals mid-set. The chandeliers blazed overhead. Every fixture in the room burned at full brightness, crystal pendants throwing rainbow refractions across the dancers below. I knew the Canadian Room had been locked for 2 weeks. Renovation project, something about refinishing the floor. Shane had mentioned it in passing. Don't bother checking that section. It's sealed up tight. Contractors start next Monday. But here it was, alive and loud and full of people who dressed like they'd stepped out of 1920-something. A woman in a green beaded dress spun past, laughing at something her partner said. I could see the individual sequins on her gown, the precise wave of her bobbed hair, the smear of dark lipstick on her mouth. Real. Solid. Not transparent or flickering or any of the things ghosts were supposed to be in stories. The song ended. Dancers applauded, the sound of it echoing off the coffered ceiling. The band leader counted off the next number. Someone touched my elbow. I turned. A man stood beside me, shorter than me by a couple inches. Slight build in a burgundy and gold uniform that matched the bellhop outfit I'd seen in old photographs from the hotel's archive. Brass buttons down the front, gold piping on the shoulders, a small pillbox cap perched at an angle on his slicked dark hair. His face was too pale, waxy almost, and when he smiled I could see too many teeth crowding his mouth. "Good evening, sir." His voice was soft, measured, eerily polite. "I'm afraid the ballroom is reserved for this evening's festivities." I found my voice somewhere. "Who are you?" "Alexander Walsh, sir. I serve the house." He gestured toward the dancers with one white-gloved hand. "The anniversary celebration is a private function. The living aren't welcome during such occasions." The living. He said it casually, the way you'd mention a dress code or reservation requirement. What anniversary? My mouth was dry. Alexander's smile widened. Those teeth. Christ. Too numerous, too sharp, fitting together wrong in a way that made my brain itch trying to process it. "Why, the hotel's anniversary, sir." He tilted his head, studying me with pale gray eyes that reflected the ballroom's golden light. "We celebrate every year, those of us who remain." The music played on behind him. Dancers swirled across the floor, laughing and spinning, celebrating something I couldn't name in a room that should have been dark and locked and empty. Every January 15th, Alexander said, the hotel remembers. He turned from the dancers, looking at me now with those pale gray eyes, that unsettling smile showing too many teeth. The music continued behind him. Waltz tempo, strings and brass, couples spinning across the floor in their outdated finery. Remembers what? My voice came out steadier than I felt. What it has consumed. He said it casual. Matter of fact, the way you'd mention the weather or the time. The building feeds throughout the year, Mr. Barry. Small things mostly. Moments, emotions. The occasional unfortunate who wanders too far from the well-lit paths. But on the anniversary, he gestured toward the dancers. On this night, it digests, processes, relives every morsel. The temperature had dropped. I could see my breath now, faint clouds in the ballroom's golden light. Anniversary of what? The fire. Alexander tilted his head. January 15th, 1928. The original Fairmont Royal York opened its doors 3 weeks later, but this building, the true building, it was born that night. Fed well from the beginning. I'd worked here 3 months, walked these halls every night 5 shifts a week. Shane had never mentioned a fire. The hotel literature in the staff room talked about the grand opening in February 28, the architectural significance, the famous guests over the decades. Nothing about a fire. You're saying... I'm saying you should check the date, Mr. Barry. That smile widened. You did forget to look, didn't you? So focused on your rounds, your reports, your careful documentation, never once checking your calendar. My phone sat heavy in my pocket. I didn't want to look. Wanted to tell Alexander he was full of shit, that I knew exactly what day it was, that I'd checked the date when I clocked in at 11 p.m. I pulled out my phone. The lock screen glowed bright in the ballroom's dimness. Time displayed at the top. 3:17 a.m. Date underneath. January 15th. My stomach went cold. I'd thought it was the 14th. Could have sworn Shane had mentioned it during shift change, talking about his daughter's birthday coming up on the 16th, joking about having to work the overnight on the 15th. But that had been last week. 2 weeks ago. The days blurred together on night shift. Sunday felt identical to Thursday. I marked time by paycheck deposits and the slowly changing weather outside the lobby windows. There it is. Alexander's voice carried that detached amusement. The moment of realization. I do enjoy that part. I looked up from my phone. The ballroom lights went out, not dimmed, not a gradual fade, just instant, complete darkness swallowing everything. The dancers, the decorations, Alexander's pale face. Gone between one heartbeat and the next. My flashlight. I'd clipped it to my belt when I left the desk. Fingers found it automatically, muscle memory from 3 months of rounds, and I yanked it free and thumbed the switch. The beam cut through absolute black. Empty room. No dancers, no orchestra, no tables with their white cloths and crystal glasses. The beam swept across bare walls, scuffed hardwood floors, stacked chairs pushed against the far side. Dust motes drifted through the light. The ballroom, as it should be, dark and locked and unused, except the piano stood uncovered in the center of the floor. I hadn't seen it before. The beam had passed right over that spot. I was sure of it, showing nothing but empty space. But there it sat now. Grand piano, black lacquer finish, lid propped open. Old thing. Older than the Steinways they used for events. The finish cracked and yellowed. My breath came short, visible clouds in the flashlight beam. The piano key moved, one key, somewhere in the middle register. I watched it depress slowly, smoothly, like an invisible finger pressing down with deliberate care. The note rang out. Single tone, pure and clear, hanging in the dead air of the ballroom. It resonated through the empty space, through my chest, vibrating in my teeth and the bones of my skull. Too loud. Wrong somehow, the acoustics all off, the note sustaining longer than it should, growing instead of fading. Another key dropped. Higher note this time, dissonant interval, clashing with the first. Both tones building, swelling, filling the darkness with sound that made my ears ache. Third key. Fourth. I ran. Flashlight beam bouncing wild across the walls, my boots loud on the hardwood, the piano notes chasing me toward the doors. No rhythm to them. Random intervals, discordant and building like something dragging fingers across the keys in slow motion. I hit the doors hard. Shoulder first, expecting resistance, but they flew open and I stumbled through into the hallway beyond. The music stopped. I kept running. Down the corridor, past the service elevator, around the corner to the main stairs. My radio banged against my hip. Flashlight still clutched in my hand, the beam jerking with each step. Didn't slow down until I reached the landing between floors. Stopped there, doubled over, gasping. The stairwell smelled normal. Concrete and old paint and cleaning solution. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and bright and real. My watch read 3:28 a.m. 11 minutes since I'd checked my phone in the ballroom. Felt longer. Felt like I'd been down there for an hour, watching those dancers spin and spin while Alexander smiled and explained the hotel's hunger in his antiquated phrasing. I pulled out my phone again, double-checked the date. Still January 15th. Shane's voice echoed in my memory. The first night I'd worked alone back in October after 2 weeks of training shifts. He'd walked me through the building one last time, pointing out the problem areas, the equipment quirks, the unwritten rules. Stay out of the Royal Suite corridor after 3:30 a.m. Specific like that. Not the 14th floor or the suites. The Royal Suite corridor. 3rd floor, West Wing, where they kept the premium accommodations for dignitaries and celebrities and people with money to burn. I'd asked why. Shane had shrugged, said it was just easier. Housekeeping got pissy if security disturbed the high-value guests, and nobody was awake at that hour anyway. Better to skip it, focus on the public areas, avoid complaints. Made sense at the time. Now, I checked my watch again. 3:31 a.m. 2 minutes. The stairwell was quiet, just the fluorescent hum, my breathing gradually slowing, the distant sound of the heating system cycling somewhere in the building's guts. I could go back to the desk, sit there for the remaining 3.5 hours of my shift, do my paperwork, pretend the ballroom had been a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and too much coffee. Clock out at 7, drive home, sleep it off. Come back tomorrow night and forget the whole thing. Except tomorrow night would be January 16th. The anniversary would be over. Whatever the hotel was digesting, reliving, remembering, it would be done. I'd never know if Shane's rule had a reason beyond guest relations. 3:32 a.m. The scream started at 3:33 exactly. I was still in the stairwell, one hand on the railing, trying to decide whether to head up or down. The sound came through the walls, distant but clear, a woman's voice, raw with absolute terror. Not a startled yelp or a frightened shout, the kind of scream that came from your gut when something had gone wrong beyond fixing. It cut off mid-breath. The silence after was worse. I stood there, gripped tight on the railing, listening to my pulse hammer in my ears. The scream had come from above. 3rd floor, West Wing, had to be. The acoustics in the stairwell carried sound weird, but I'd learned the building's quirks over 3 months of overnight rounds. Royal Suite corridor. Shane's rule, the one I'd followed without question for 90-some shifts. My radio crackled. Static first. The familiar burst of white noise that meant someone was keying their mic. I waited for Shane's voice. Maybe he'd come back. Maybe he'd heard something from the parking booth. Maybe... Ryan. Not Shane. The voice came through distorted, layered with static, but I caught the tone underneath. Soft, measured, that same detached amusement I'd heard in the ballroom. "We've been waiting, Ryan." My thumb found the transmit button, pressed it. "Who is this?" More static. Then, "You've broken too many rules tonight. Went where you were warned not to go. Saw what you were meant to ignore." A pause. "The building is pleased." The stairwell felt smaller, walls closer than they'd been a moment ago. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. "You don't belong to your shift anymore, Ryan. You don't belong to your schedule or your rounds or your reports." The static cleared slightly. The voice came through cleaner. "You belong to us now, to the building. It's been hungry for someone like you. Someone curious, someone who asks questions, someone who doesn't listen to good advice. I should have run. Should have bolted down the stairs, out through the lobby, straight to my car and then home and then anywhere but here. I couldn't move. The attention I'd felt earlier, in the fourth-floor stairwell, in the ballroom with Alexander watching me, it was back. Magnified. Focused entirely on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl and my breath catch. The building was looking at me. Not watching. Looking. The way you'd examine something small you'd caught, turning it over in your hands, deciding what to do with it. Hungry. Patient. The radio crackled again, but this time only static came through. White noise that gradually faded to silence. 3:36 a.m. I stood in the stairwell, flashlight still clutched in one hand, radio quiet on my belt, and felt the Fairmont Royal York's full attention settle over me, waiting to see what I'd do next. I made it back to the security office and shoved the desk against the door. Took both hands and all my weight to get the thing moving. Heavy old wood that had probably been sitting in that room since the 70s. Scarred surface and metal drawer pulls, and enough mass to make a decent barricade. It scraped across the floor with a sound that set my teeth on edge. I wedged it tight against the door frame, tested it with my shoulder. Solid enough. Not that I thought a desk would stop whatever the hell was happening in this building. But it made me feel better. Gave me something to do with my hands besides shake. The monitors glowed in their neat grid above the workspace. 16 screens showing 16 different angles of the Fairmont Royal York at, I checked the clock on the wall, 3:32 a.m. Just another overnight shift. Just another night of watching empty corridors and vacant lobbies and all that expensive real estate sitting quiet while the city slept outside. Except nothing on those screens looked right anymore. I pulled the rolling chair close and sat down. Started scanning the feeds systematically, top left to bottom right, the way I'd done 100 times before during my 3 months here. Looking for anomalies, checking the usual problem spots. The main lobby feed showed guests walking through the space. Nothing unusual about that. People came and went at all hours in a hotel this size. But they were walking backward, not stumbling or joking around, not doing that awkward reverse shuffle people do when they're trying to back out of a conversation. Actually walking backward with perfect coordination, crossing the marble floor in reverse, their feet touching down heel first in a way that made my stomach clench. I watched a woman in a business suit glide backward toward the elevators. Watched a couple move in tandem retreat across the lobby, their arms linked, their faces forward, but their bodies traveling the wrong direction. Nobody seemed to notice. The night desk clerk stood at his station looking down at something I couldn't see, completely oblivious. Different clerk, not anyone I recognized. I moved to the next screen. Pool area. The indoor pool on the basement level, usually lit with that weird blue-green glow that made everything look like an aquarium. Except the feed showed the pool drained. Just an empty concrete basin with a single figure standing at the deep end. A child. Maybe 8 or 9 years old, wearing old-fashioned swimming clothes, the kind you'd see in photographs from the 20s or 30s, a full-body suit with shorts and a top. Standing perfectly still at the bottom of the empty pool, arms at their sides, face tilted up toward the camera. not moving, not breathing that I could tell from this angle. Just standing there in the empty pool that I knew for a fact was full of water because I'd walked past it during my rounds 2 nights ago and seen people swimming laps at 11 p.m. I checked the timestamp on the feed. Live. Current. 3:34 a.m. My hand moved to the radio on my belt, lifted it halfway before I stopped myself. Who was I going to call? Shane had clocked out hours ago. The overnight manager was somewhere. Probably dealing with guest issues, probably nowhere near his office. And what would I even say? There's a kid standing in a pool that isn't drained. Come take a look at this monitor feed that shows impossible things. I put the radio down, moved to the next screen. 4th floor corridor, east wing. Empty hallway with the usual runner carpet and wall sconces and room doors marching off into the distance. Nothing unusual. Except there was someone walking down that hallway. Me. I watched myself move past the camera. Same Navy security uniform, same posture, same build. Watched myself pause at room 412 and check the door handle, then continue down the corridor toward the fire exit. I was sitting in the security office with a desk shoved against the door. I was not on the 4th floor. My breathing had gone shallow. I could hear it in the quiet office, rapid and thin, the sound of someone trying not to panic. I pressed my palms flat against the desk surface, the workspace, not the barricade, and felt the cool laminate under my skin. Solid. Real. I was here, in this room, not walking the 4th floor. The figure on the monitor disappeared through the fire exit door. I checked the next screen, 2nd floor corridor. Empty. Next screen. 6th floor corridor. There I was again, walking past the camera, radio in hand, looking like I was mid-round. Next screen. 10th floor. Same thing. My own figure moving through the frame, checking doors, doing the job I was supposed to be doing while I sat barricaded in the office watching impossible footage. How many of me were walking these corridors? I cycled through the feeds faster. Lobby, clear. Parking garage, empty vehicles. Kitchen, dark. Ballroom. I stopped. Went back to the ballroom feed. Dark. Empty. The way it should be at 3:37 a.m. No music, no dancers, no Alexander Walsh with his unsettling smile and his too many teeth. Just chairs stacked against the walls and that massive space sitting quiet. Had I imagined it? Hallucinated the whole thing? Some kind of breakdown brought on by stress or lack of sleep, or the particular pressure of working overnights in a building this old? I rubbed my eyes. Felt the grit there, the exhaustion pulling at the edges of my thoughts. Then I noticed the feed label on the bottom monitor. Grand Ballroom, 1929. Not a location label. A date. I leaned closer. The timestamp in the corner read January 15th, 1929, 11:47 p.m. The footage showed the ballroom full of people, hundreds of them, all dressed in formal wear from that era. The men in tuxedos and the women in dropped waist dresses with beaded fringe. A full orchestra played on the stage. Couples danced. Champagne flowed at a long table draped in white linen. The grand opening. Had to be. The Fairmont Royal York had opened in 1929. Biggest hotel in the British Commonwealth, pride of Toronto. I'd read about it during my first week, looking up the building's history during a slow shift. But this footage shouldn't exist in the security system. Hell, this footage shouldn't exist at all. Film cameras in 1929, maybe, but not integrated into a digital monitoring system 90-some years later. Not playing back on a feed that was supposed to show me current, live surveillance. I watched the party continue. Watched the dancers spin and the orchestra play and the champagne glasses rise in toasts I couldn't hear through the silent feed. Then I saw him, Alexander Walsh. Standing at the edge of the crowd wearing that same burgundy and gold bellhop uniform, his pale face turned toward the camera, looking directly at the lens with those gray eyes and that smile showing too many teeth. staring at me across 94 years. He didn't move. Everyone else swirled and danced and celebrated around him, but Alexander stood perfectly still, his gaze locked on the camera. On me. Like he'd known I'd be sitting here in this office watching this impossible footage, like he'd been waiting all this time for me to see. The phone rang. I jerked back from the monitors. The sound cut through the office. Old-style landline ring, loud and mechanical and wrong at 3:41 in the morning. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then stopped. I stared at it. Black desk phone with a coiled cord and a row of buttons for different lines, the kind of equipment that had been standard in offices for decades. The receiver sat in its cradle, silent now. The ring had stopped after 3, which meant what? That I was supposed to ignore it? That it had been a wrong number or a system glitch or some automated check-in that didn't need a human response? I picked up the receiver, held it to my ear. Didn't say anything, just listened. "Ryan?" Shane's voice came through, tight with something that sounded like panic. "Ryan, where the hell have you been?" I opened my mouth, closed it. Shane had clocked out at 11, had gone home hours ago, left me to handle the overnight solo the way we did every shift. He shouldn't be calling at 3:41 in the morning unless something had gone seriously wrong. "I'm in the office," I said. My voice came out rough. "What's—" "The morning shift just got here," Shane cut in. "They found the security office empty. No sign of you anywhere. I got a call from Marcus asking where you were, if you'd called in sick, if there'd been some kind of emergency. I've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. I looked at the desk shoved against the door, at the monitors glowing in their grid, at the office around me, small and windowless and definitely occupied. "I'm here," I said. "I've been here all night. Ryan, they're standing in the empty office right now. You're not there." I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. The second hand swept around the face. Smooth, mechanical movement, the kind you could trust. I'd checked this same watch in the stairwell outside the ballroom. When? Earlier tonight. Had to have been earlier tonight. I'd looked down and seen... What time had it been? I couldn't remember. Couldn't pull up the image of the watch face, couldn't recall the specific numbers. Just the general sense that it had been late, 3-something, maybe 4. Now it read 8:47 a.m. 6 hours. 6 hours had vanished while I'd been sitting in this office watching impossible footage and barricading myself behind a desk that apparently no one else could see. "Ryan?" Shane's voice had changed. Softer now. Careful. The tone you'd use with someone who might be having a breakdown. "Where are you? Just tell me where you are and I'll come get you." I looked at the monitors. The feed labeled 1929 showed static now. Just gray and white noise, no ballroom, no dancers, no Alexander Walsh staring at the camera. The other feeds displayed normal security footage, morning lobby activity, guests checking out, the pool full of water with the early lap swimmers doing their laps, no child standing in an empty basin, no backwards walking guests, no multiple versions of me patrolling corridors I hadn't walked. "I don't know," I said. Hung up the phone. My watch still read 8:47. I sat in the security office with the desk shoved against the door and 6 hours gone from my life and absolutely no memory of where they'd gone. I'd been here. I knew I'd been here. Had felt the chair under me, the cool laminate under my palms, the grit in my eyes from exhaustion and stress. But I hadn't been here at all. The morning shift had found the office empty. Shane had gotten a panicked call. They'd been looking for me while I sat barricaded in a room that apparently didn't contain me, watching feeds that showed things that couldn't exist, talking to a colleague on a phone that had only rung 3 times before going silent. I tried to trace back through the night, tried to remember the sequence of events that had led me here, the elevator opening on the 14th floor, the smell of roses, Alexander Walsh in the ballroom with his formal speech and his warnings about the anniversary. The hotel remembers, he'd said. What had it remembered about me? What had it taken during those 6 hours while I'd been here and not here, present and absent, watching myself walk corridors on monitors that showed impossible things? I didn't know, couldn't name it. But something had been taken from me that I'd never get back. Some piece of myself that the Fairmont Royal York had claimed as payment for surviving its anniversary. The hotel had fed on something I couldn't identify, and I had no idea what I'd lost. Shane was waiting in the lobby when I came down, 6:32 a.m. Early light filtering through the tall windows along Front Street, turning the marble floors pale gold. The overnight shift almost over. Just another morning at the Fairmont Royal York, except Shane never stuck around this late, and he was holding something in his hands. An envelope, old paper, yellowed at the edges. "Ryan," he spotted me crossing the lobby. "Got a minute?" I'd spent the last hour in the security office, desk still shoved against the door, trying to write up what had happened, trying to find words for Alexander Walsh and the ballroom that shouldn't have existed, and the weight of the hotel's attention pressing down on me. The report sat abandoned on the desk, half-finished sentences trailing into nothing. Some things don't fit into incident logs. Shane looked rough. More tired than I'd ever seen him, circles under his eyes darker than mine, mouth set in a tight line. He wore his usual button-down and slacks, supervisor casual, but his collar sat crooked and his hair stuck up on one side. "Yeah," I said. "What's up?" He glanced around the lobby. Empty this early, just us and the distant sound of the kitchen staff prepping breakfast. The front desk wouldn't be staffed for another half hour. "Come here." Shane walked toward the windows, away from the security desk, away from the cameras. I followed. He held out the envelope. "Found this in the archives yesterday. Been thinking about it all night, whether to show you or not." The envelope felt stiff in my hands. Archival paper, the kind museums use. Through the translucent surface, I could see the edge of a photograph. "What is it?" "Grand opening gala," Shane said. "January 15th, 1929. Hotel's got boxes of photos from that night in storage. Historical society stuff, mostly. I was down there looking for..." He stopped, rubbed his face. "Doesn't matter. Just look at it." I pulled the photograph out. Black and white, 8x10, professionally shot. The ballroom, the real ballroom, the imperial room on the ground floor, filled with guests. Women in long beaded dresses, men in tuxedos, champagne glasses catching the light from massive chandeliers overhead. The crowd faced the camera, dozens of faces frozen mid-celebration, smiling and laughing, and toasting the Fairmont Royal York's grand opening. January 15th, 1929. 95 years ago. Almost a century of history captured in silver gelatin and paper. I scanned the faces. Strangers, all of them. Dead now, everyone in this photograph. Gone to dust and memory while the hotel kept standing. Then I saw him. Back corner. Left side. Partially obscured by the crowd, but visible enough. Alexander Walsh in his burgundy and gold bellhop uniform, brass buttons gleaming, that sharp part in his dark hair, standing with perfect posture among the celebrating guests. My hands went cold. "Keep looking," Shane said quietly. I moved my focus across the photograph, searching the crowd more carefully now, examining each face, each figure, my pulse starting to hammer in my throat. There. Right beside Alexander, maybe 2 feet away, standing at attention with his hands clasped behind his back, wearing a Navy security uniform with black boots. Me, my face, my angular features, my short black hair, my hollow cheeks. Looking straight at the camera with an expression I recognized. The careful, neutral mask I wore on duty, observing everything, giving nothing away. The photograph slipped in my grip. I caught it before it fell, fingers leaving prints on the edges. That's not possible. Yeah, Shane's voice came from far away. That's what I said too. I stared at my own face, frozen in a photograph taken 95 years before I was born. Before my parents were born. Before their parents were born. January 15th, 1929. And there I stood in the back of the Imperial Room, wearing the same uniform I'd put on tonight, standing beside the thing that called itself Alexander Walsh. Both of us watching the celebration while the hotel's first guests danced and drank and had no idea what they were christening. The edges of the photograph felt sharp against my fingers. Could be someone who looks similar, I said. Heard how hollow it sounded. Shane shook his head. I thought that too, wanted to think that. Then I found 3 more photos from the same night. Different angles, different moments. You're in 2 of them. Same uniform, same position. Always near the edges, always watching. He paused. Always near Alexander. The lobby felt too bright suddenly, too exposed. All those windows letting in morning light. All that marble and brass and wood paneling. The hotel breathing around us. How long have you known about this? Found it yesterday afternoon. Spent my whole evening shift trying to figure out what it meant. Shane looked at me directly. Then I heard about the ballroom on 14. I went still. Security cameras caught you going up, he continued. Caught you coming back down an hour later. But there's a gap, 43 minutes where the 14th floor feed went dark. Just static. When it came back, you were in the stairwell looking... He stopped. Different. Different. Yeah, that was one word for it. I handed the photograph back. Didn't want to touch it anymore, didn't want to see my own face staring out from nearly a century ago, proof of something I couldn't explain and didn't want to accept. Shane didn't take it. Keep it. You should have it. Why? Because you survived. He said it flat, matter of fact. Because you made it through January 15th and you're standing here, and that means something. That means you got out. The laminated card sat in my pocket. Still there, still waiting. That careful handwriting warning me to stay away from a danger I'd walked straight into anyway. The card, I said. Someone left it for me. Someone who knew. Shane nodded slowly. There have been others, over the years. Security guards, maintenance staff, overnight workers, people who stayed too long, who were here on the wrong nights. Most of them just disappeared from the records. Employment files gone, no termination paperwork, nothing. Like they never worked here at all. He gestured at the photograph still in my hands, but some of them show up in the archives. Old photos, guest registries, incident reports from decades ago. Same faces, same people, trapped in the hotel's history. The morning light slanted through the windows. Outside, Front Street was waking up. Traffic sounds, distant voices, the normal city rhythm starting another day. Inside the Fairmont Royal York, something else kept time. How long have you known? I asked again. About what this place really is? 5 years. Shane's voice went quiet. Figured it out my second January here. Started noticing the patterns, the missing staff files, the incidents that never got properly logged, the way certain floors felt wrong on certain nights. Did my research. Found the archives, found the photographs. He met my eyes. Found my supervisor from when I first started, guy named Martinez. Good man, taught me everything about hotel security. He quit after 6 months, and I never heard from him again. Let me guess. You found him in an old photograph. 1967. Hotel anniversary event. He's in the background wearing his uniform, standing in a hallway that doesn't exist anymore. Shane's jaw tightened. He's still in there, part of him, caught in the building's memory. I looked down at the photograph in my hands. At myself, standing beside Alexander Walsh, both of us servants to the hotel's hunger, both of us already claimed. The card hadn't been a prank. It had been a warning from someone who'd survived before. Someone who'd made it through January 15th and walked out and understood what they'd lost in the process. Someone trying to save the next person from making the same mistake. I'd ignored it. Stubborn and curious and too skeptical for my own good, I dismissed the warning and stayed anyway, and now part of me existed in a photograph from 1929, proof that the hotel had already claimed me long before I ever applied for the job. "I'm done," I said. Shane didn't look surprised. "Yeah. I'm quitting. This morning. Right now." "Good." He said it firm. Certain. "That's the right call. Get out while you still can." I pulled the laminated card from my pocket, held it up between us, that careful handwriting still legible. "Stay away from the 14th floor on January 15th. You leave these for new hires?" "When I can. When I think they might listen." Shane's expression went hard. "Most people don't. Most people think it's a joke or a hazing thing or just ignore it completely. You're the first one in 3 years who actually survived ignoring it." 3 years. 3 January 15ths. 3 people who hadn't made it out. I slipped the card back in my pocket. Kept the photograph too, folding it carefully and tucking it beside the card. Evidence of something I'd never be able to explain. Proof of an impossible truth. "Why do you stay?" I asked. Shane looked away, out the windows toward the morning light and the waking city. "Someone has to know. Someone has to keep track. Try to warn people. Document what's really happening." He paused. "And I'm already in the archives. Found myself in a photo from 2020. Hotel charity event. I'm in the background, older than I am now, still wearing the supervisor uniform." His voice went flat. "I'm already claimed. Might as well make it count for something." The Fairmont Royal York breathed around us. All that limestone and brass and wood paneling, a century of history pressed into walls and floors and ceilings. And underneath it all, that vast, hungry intelligence I'd felt watching me in the ballroom. Some buildings don't just hold history. They hunger for it. They feed on it, collecting moments and people and memories, adding them to their foundations, weaving them into their structure until the building becomes something more than architecture, something alive, something patient and ancient and endlessly consuming. I'd felt it last night, that attention settling over me, measuring me, deciding whether to keep me or let me go. I'd survived, but only barely. Only because some part of me had already been claimed, already existed in the hotel's memory, and taking all of me would have created some kind of paradox the building couldn't resolve. Or maybe it had just decided I wasn't worth keeping. Either way, I'd lost something. Given up some piece of myself as payment for walking out alive. I still couldn't identify what was missing, but I felt the absence. A hollow space somewhere inside me. A gap where something used to be. "Go home," Shane said. "Get some sleep. Come back tomorrow if you want to file official paperwork, but you don't have to. I can process it as a walkout. No questions asked." "Thanks. Don't thank me. Just get out of here." He glanced up at the ceiling, at all those floors stacked above us, at the weight of the building pressing down. "And don't come back. Not for any reason. Don't visit the restaurant. Don't book a room. Don't even walk past on the sidewalk if you can help it. You got out. Stay out." I nodded. Understood completely. The lobby stretched around us, elegant and beautiful in the morning light. Marble and brass and careful craftsmanship, a monument to luxury and service. To anyone else, it probably looked magnificent, timeless. To me, it looked hungry. I walked toward the Front Street exit, crossed the marble floors one last time, past the security desk I'd sat at for 3 months, moved through the lobby that had seemed so impressive when I'd first started. The doors were just ahead. Glass and brass, opening onto the sidewalk, onto the normal world where buildings were just buildings and January 15th was just another day. I pushed through them at 6:49 a.m. Cold air hit my face. Toronto winter, sharp and clean, cutting through the last traces of that rose smell I'd been carrying since the elevator opened on 14. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed. Normal air, city air, exhaust and cold pavement and the faint smell of coffee from somewhere down the block. Real things, present things, not roses from a ballroom that shouldn't exist, not the weight of a century pressing down. Behind me, the Fairmont Royal York rose into the morning sky, 28 floors of limestone and windows, elegant and imposing, a landmark visible from half the downtown core. I didn't look back. The photograph sat in my pocket next to the laminated card, both of them proof of the same impossible truth. The card, a warning from someone who'd survived before, someone who'd made it out and understood what that cost. The photograph, evidence that I'd been claimed long before I ever walked through those doors looking for work, that some part of me had always belonged to the building, trapped in its memory, caught in its hunger. I'd escaped, but I'd left something behind. Some piece of myself that would stay in those walls forever, feeding whatever vast intelligence lived in the architecture. Maybe it was already gone, that missing part I couldn't identify. Or maybe it was still in there, frozen in that photograph from 1929, standing beside Alexander Walsh and watching the grand opening gala with empty eyes. Either way, I understood now. Some buildings don't just hold history, they hunger for it. They consume it, collect it, weave it into their foundations until past and present collapse together and time becomes just another material in the construction. The Fairmont Royal York had fed on me, had been feeding on me since before I was born, reaching backward through its own memory to claim what it wanted, creating the conditions that would eventually bring me to its doors. I'd thought I was applying for a job. Really, I was just fulfilling an appointment made 95 years ago, but I'd survived. I'd walked out, and I wasn't going back. The morning was getting brighter, traffic picking up on Front Street, people heading to work, the city moving through another ordinary day. I turned west and started walking, leaving the Fairmont Royal York behind me. Knowing I'd escaped, knowing part of me would never leave, knowing that somewhere in the archives, in a photograph from 1929, I would always be standing in that ballroom beside Alexander Walsh, both of us servants to the hotel's endless hunger, both of us claimed by something that measured time in decades and fed on human memory. The laminated card stayed in my pocket. Maybe someday I'd pass it along to someone else. Another warning. Another attempt to save someone from making the same mistake. Or maybe I'd keep it. A reminder of what I'd survived and what I'd lost. Either way, I was done with the Fairmont Royal York. The building could keep whatever piece of me it had taken. I just wanted to forget.